Okay, everyone, I'm going to cover 5 COVID-19 restrictions that are in the Philippines but not in America. Okay, let's get started. Number 1, COVID Shield Travel Authority. So what's a COVID Shield Travel Authority? When you enter the Philippines at any of the international airport, you must quarantine either at a authorized hotel or a government quarantine facility. Before you leave the airport, you will be given a COVID-19 test. Of course, that you have to pay for, but you will be given that test. Then from there, you will be allowed to go to your quarantine facility, whichever you choose to pay for, a hotel or the government quarantine facility itself. Once your tests come back, your COVID-19 test comes back negative, you will be emailed this paperwork here. And as you can see, it says COVID Shield Travel Authority. If you look at our paperwork, you can see where it says place of destination. It is Surigao del Norte. What this does is it gave us permission, because our international airport was Cebu. It gave us permission to leave Cebu and fly to Surigao del Norte. Now, on the federal government side, there's some other paperwork we had to have filled out before the airport would allow us to board the plane, but we'll talk about that in a future restriction. The second restriction is adults need to fill out paperwork so that you can have a EHealth Pass. The EHealth Pass allows you to move around, so as you go in and out of malls or different areas, it's able to be scanned for contact tracing. Here is a picture of our EHealth Pass and the one that we was actually using. What I did was, instead of carrying around this paper, I just took a picture of it and put it on my cell phone. Then I would just pull up the picture and they actually could scan my cell phone. What I saw other people do, they actually made it a little bit smaller, kind of made it into a badge and laminated it. So that you need in the Philippines to move around, but we don't have anything like that, at least where I live here in Arkansas in America. Okay, now the third COVID-19 restrictions that are in the Philippines but not in America is basically the process of going to the mall, department stores, even going in and out of banks. So basically what happens in the Philippines is when you approach the business, let's just use a mall as the example. You approach the mall, there's going to be a security guard or some type of mall employee at the front door. The first thing they're going to be doing, they're going to be visually checking to make sure you have on a face mask and a face shield. Once that's a go, they're going to scan your EHealth Pass. Then, after scanning your EHealth Pass, they're going to take your temperature. If that's all a go, you're able to enter the mall. Another thing is, not at all locations, but in a lot of the locations, even at the banks, they had basically a floor mat that had a cleaning solution in it. You had to put your feet in it, your shoes on or your flip-flops on, and clean the bottom of your shoes, then dry them off. A lot of times it was cardboard that was laid down. You would dry the bottom of your feet off, then you would enter the business. That is just a process if you look at going into the malls or the banks in the Philippines. But of course, in America, you go into Walmart, you go into any store, you basically just, you have your mask on and then you walk in. Not like that in the Philippines. A lot more restrictions. Okay, now the fourth restriction, COVID-19 restriction that is in the Philippines but not in America, is you have to have permission to move about in the Philippines. So, for example, when we came in, our final destination was to go to Surigao del Norte. We landed in the Philippines in the Cebu International Airport. Once we finished our quarantine and we was clear to leave the hotel, the airport checked for paperwork before they was allowed to fly us to our final destination. For example, they checked for our COVID Shield Travel Authority to make sure where they was flying us to was listed as a destination on that paperwork. Then we had to have a letter of acceptance from the mayor in the area that we was traveling to. Another piece of paperwork we had to have was the Barangay certification, which the Barangay, which here is kind of like the local neighborhood, was giving us permission to enter their neighborhood. But not only that, we also had to have a certification letter from a hotel that we was quarantining at. And if you can see here, this is our letter. You can see on the letter it says how long we stayed at the hotel for quarantine, the dates and everything, and that we did not leave that hotel. So please don't think that when you go to the Philippines, you're going to go to a hotel, you're going to quarantine, and then at night or certain times you're going to leave the hotel and come back. No, this letter, as you can see, was signed by the hotel manager. You must stay there. And if you leave, basically what's going to happen is the police is going to come and pick you up, and they're going to take you to their government quarantine facility. So that's how that's going to happen there in that area. You know, also, when we were in Surigao del Norte, we traveled to Cagayan. If you can see here on the map, this is the distance we had to travel. Now, when we traveled, before we actually left, because you have checkpoints as you travel around in the Philippines that you have to go through. A lot of these checkpoints are for COVID-19. Now, we had to have a barangay certification basically saying that we were not mentioned and they have no information of us developing any signs of COVID-19 in the past 14 days. After that, we had to take that paperwork and go over to the municipality medical office to get a medical certification that basically state that they have no information that we contracted the COVID-19 or we was in contact with anyone that had the COVID-19. Now, that's the second paperwork. Now, then the third one, we had to basically go to the police office right there in the neighborhood or the barangay and receive what's called a travel authority. We basically told them where we was going to be traveling to, when we was going to be traveling, and what type of vehicle we was going to be traveling in. If you see our paperwork here, it does say vehicle pickup, Ford Ranger, and then it has the vehicle license plate number. So as we go through the checkpoints, this paperwork, we was able to show and prove that yes, we were allowed to leave. We don't have the COVID-19 as a known COVID-19, and we are basically safe to travel just long as we're wearing our mask and face shield. Now, the fifth, and this is one of the biggest, no children under the age of 18 is allowed in the mall, the bank, and a lot of department stores in the Philippines. A lot of restaurants also, but that's without saying that, of course, they're going to be allowed to go in Jollibees. They're going to be allowed to go in McDonald's. But other establishments, you just don't see children. As a matter of fact, in the mall, we were trying to go into the mall with my wife's niece, who's 13 years old. The security guard stopped her at the door and basically told us she was not allowed to enter because of the law. So children are not allowed in a lot of these stores, and the only exemption to that is if they were at that mall for like government business. In the Philippines, a lot of times in the mall, a government office. I know the immigration office is in one of the malls that we kept going in, and also in case there's the child is needing a medical checkup. In the Philippines, I did notice that there was, as soon as you walk into the mall, there was 2 eye clinics. And both of those clinics, I saw children at those clinics, but the children are not allowed to walk around in malls. The S&M malls, the bigger malls, they just not allowed in those malls. What I noticed is the kids will be left outside in the car waiting, or if the parents was walking to these stores, the children will be waiting outside of the store where the guard was, basically waiting for their parents to come out. So it's like basically you going to Walmart here in America and you see no children inside that Walmart because they're not allowed. Now, I hope that helped you a little. So if you're going to be traveling to the Philippines anytime soon, we return back on March the 12th. So all of this is pretty much updated, March 12th, 2021. And all of these restrictions, these 5 restrictions I spoke about, was there in the Philippines, but none of these restrictions are in America. So you may not be prepared for them until you get there. Then basically it's kind of like having to do a mental adjustment, kind of just being patient in a lot of situations as you go through these checkpoints, and you just kind of understand that it's really just for safety reasons, and contact tracing is just in case you come in contact with someone with COVID-19. They can send you an email, or they can basically contact you and let you know, hey, we think you ought to quarantine for a certain amount of days. Now, if you notice that there's any other restrictions I kind of left off that could be helpful, please put it in the comment below. But basically what I wanted to do is for people traveling to the Philippines to understand the difference. And in America, basically when we landed here at the airport in LAX, we didn't have to quarantine at all. We basically just took the next plane to Dallas, and then the next plane to Dallas, we took it to Little Rock, Arkansas. There was no talk on the planes here, even as we come in, as we was going to have to quarantine at a quarantine facility. Even no talks of having to quarantine at your house. But when you travel in the Philippines, as soon as you step outside of America, and let's say you stop over in Hong Kong, or Japan, they start making announcements that how their citizens have to quarantine for at least 14 days. They tell what the law is. And as we was coming back, they were telling people, hey, if you're going to this area, or this country or that country, even if you are a citizen and you hold a passport, you still have to quarantine before you are allowed to move on to your final destination. I just want to say again, thank you for stopping by. Hope it helped. And don't forget to subscribe and like this video so YouTube algorithm can pick it up and other people can learn from this video. Hey, thank you.